On this episode of Rock School Proprietor Podcast, we're doing something a little bit different. This is a Greatest Hits of 2025 episode featuring some of the most powerful insights from previous conversations. You'll hear my conversation with Dave Simon explaining why reframing practice can keep students engaged and parents satisfied. Then Tim Topham and I talk about his student-focused approach that prioritizes playing music first and reading second, moving beyond traditional methods toward creativity and intuition. If you've been with us for a while, this is a great refresher on ideas that are transforming how we think about music education. And if you're new here, well, welcome. You're about to hear some game-changing perspectives. Just a quick heads up to our listeners that I'll be speaking at the NAMM show in Anaheim, California on Saturday, January 24th. My session's called Reimagining Private Music Lessons for Today's Learners, and if you're going to be there, I would love to see you. And even if you can't make the session, but you're heading to NAMM, shoot me an email at info@rockschoolproprietor.com. I'd love to connect while we're at the show. To provide a little bit of context for this first clip you're about to hear from my conversation with Dave Simon, we're talking about how most parents expect that taking music lessons means that their kid goes to lessons, gets homework, then practices at home, and set that routine to repeat. Any friction along that path, and parents might be inclined to pull kids from lessons. Dave and I got really deep about the importance of educating parents on purpose in music lessons and how that can set the stage for better outcomes and greater student retention. Now, here's, in my mind, why it's so worth it to have that conversation, to address the elephant in the room. Is it private lessons that you're looking for? Is it really something else?
Yeah.
And I'm going to frame this around Kids Rock. I've also framed this around Music Together when I've talked with Mandy, because Music Together is very much about making music. Kids Rock is very much about making music and exploring those instruments so that as that kid progresses, they're able to make a more informed decision on what instrument they might be interested in playing, right? Now, why it's so important to have this conversation is because if you start that conversation with a parent about their kid at 4 years old, and they start to see the benefits of the kid just playing music, right? Maybe not reading and writing and that aspect of it yet. At that age, when they see that benefit, that's going to stick with them. So then if you're in a situation like myself, where we have interactive band programs from 4 years old all the way through adults, it becomes way easier over time to populate your student or your studio with families that believe in the importance of playing music versus practicing music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they also value the time at the studio longer, that they understand that, no, I know he's not practicing that much at home. He's not even picking the guitar up that much, but that 30 minutes or that hour at John's music school, really, parents are looking for progress. They're looking for progress in terms of musically and as well as, in terms of the child's overall well-being. If the parent can see and hear musical progress, if the parent can go, my kid's been here for 4 months. I don't think he's ever picked up his guitar at home, but he's progressing and he loves it. And John has told me it's okay that he's not practicing. You've given them permission, then you're less likely to get the call, hey, we're dropping out. My kid's just not practicing.
Right. And let's draw the quick parallel to sports, right?
Yeah.
A kid who loves to play sports, even if they're not good at it, even if they're not the star player on the team, parents don't care. The kid is enjoying the activity. The kid's making friends. The kid is having social interactions. He seems to enjoy it. Why would they disrupt that just because the kid's not the star player? That would be a jerk move on the parent's part, right?
But can you imagine setting your kid up for, let's say, little league softball, and the
Hmm.
coach pulls you aside and says, "Look, John, your son's not practicing his batting at home. I really need
Right.
him to at least pick up the bat, 5, 10 minutes a day and just work on his swing." You're going to be like, "Dude, like what?" Like, no, I just
Right.
want him to have fun. I want him to learn about teamwork, and I want him to learn about competition and the thrill of winning, but also what it's like to lose and how to pick yourself back up. It's very clear to you. It's very clear to all of us of the life lessons that a child's going to learn on the team sport. It's not clear to parents what exactly are these kids learning in these music lessons in terms of life skills. They just
Hmm.
know that, like, hey, if my kid does well in music, my friends are going to be impressed. They're going to think he's smart, he's gifted, he's talented. It is a huge boost in a child's social status as well as the parents if the child is perceived as musically talented. So there's a
Yes.
lot of social status associated with this for both the child and the parent. But we just have to reframe in the parent's mind what exactly music lessons are going to do for their child, and that if a certain metric, such as practice, isn't really applicable, to letting them know, well, there's another metric we can look at.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's for any listeners, that's going to be my challenge for all of them is if you find yourself falling into that conversation about practice and it feels transactional, you got to figure out a different way to talk about it. If you feel like saying, yeah, they really should practice 20 minutes a day, you got to find a different way of talking about that experience.
So I think practicing is preparing yourself to do something. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think sell the kid. So, like, I think what kids want, number one, out of music lessons is they're looking for social equity. They're looking for little musical nuggets that they can show off with. They want to show grandma when she comes over for Thanksgiving that they can play 4 measures of music over and over. And they want to go, when they go to their friend's house, they see that the friend's got a piano there. They're thinking, ooh, I want to, like, I've got 4 little musical motifs that I can show off. And so the more you can kind of build up these little musical motifs that kids can kind of take around to build status, build credibility, maybe play at a school talent show, those are the wins that I'm talking about. But once a
Hmm.
kid, like, I'll never forget when I was a kid, my babysitter taught me how to play the introduction of Come Sail Away, that stick song.
Yep. Hmm.
It's got this kind of like, Baroque sounding piano intro. All I could play was like 8 measures of it. And I
Hmm.
really wanted to learn more. But that desire that I had, if someone said to me, well, if you want to learn the whole song, you're going to have to put in about like 18 hours of practice, I would have been like, sign me up, because I
Yeah.
really want that.
I'm going to riff on that a little bit because you mentioned that's what kids want. I I would argue that that's actually what parents want too, because when
Hmm.
parents put their kids in music lessons, they don't they don't think about like, oh, this is going to be great. I can't wait to listen to my kid practice every week. What they have in their head is maybe it's the holidays and they have family over and the kid sits down at the piano and plays a song and the entire family enjoys it. That's what parents picture. Or maybe it's
Right.
they're camping in the summer and they grab a guitar and they're strumming along around the campfire and people start to sing. Those are the things that I think parents envision in their heads when they get their kids involved in music lessons. So again, the more that we can kind of pull them away from that idea that if your kid is not practicing 20 minutes a day, then they're failing, push them in that other direction. Like, remember what you want. You want them to play. Well, let's get them to play.
Right. It makes me think Tim Topham. Tim?
Not personally, but
You know,
yes, I know
his
Tim.
Yeah, so he's got a book, No Book Beginners. And it's this whole idea of like, don't introduce that book. The minute you introduce that method book, now fun and easy has shifted from challenging and hard and maybe even seemingly impossible. So it's sort of, and I think Victor Wooten talks about this. It's like get the kids to get a child to express themselves musically first, get them to communicate musically, allow them to experience what it's like to sort of take all of their emotions and funnel them through music, and then introduce how to read. It's like same with, we're not taught how to read until what, like we're 4 or 5. We're introduced. Right. So we've got a good 3 years. We got a solid year of listening to speech, and then we start speaking a little words. But usually by the time we're like 2, we can really express ourselves pretty well, but we can't even read the ABCs. And I think that's a great approach to take to music, is let kids experience the thrill and the joy of playing an instrument first, and then bring in the Hal Leonard book.
Dave almost naturally set up this next clip from the conversation that I had with Tim Topham, which was just a couple months after that conversation I had with Dave. And Tim's talking about his early days teaching piano and developing his approach by supplementing method book content with more practical ways of playing and approaching piano. Then Tim explains a little bit of history and even why method books existed in the first place, and how they facilitated this very long tradition that focused so heavily on reading music, and why so many piano instructors today even still take this approach.
So I guess the intuitive part of what I was doing, even in those early lessons, which were fairly traditional, is I was bringing in as much as I could for students about that sort of chordal background, because I just know how valuable it is. And it's just not taught if you're going to go traditional classical path. You go straight to reading single notes. Chords, if they're even in a method book, it's like level 5 or something, a few years in. And I just so strongly disagree. Students can be taught about basic tonic and dominant harmonies and basic chords, or even chord shells, just, a fifth, from the first few lessons, or at least, after the first month of lessons.
Yeah. That's how guitar is taught most of the time.
Yeah. You start with chords, right?
Yeah. Here's how to play a chord. And that's going to lead you from playing one chord to putting 2 chords together, 3 chords together. Here's a song that you can play. And there you are in the first, depending on the student, first few months, students playing a song. I wanted to share with you a story. So years ago, because first off, I've always had a hard time hiring piano instructors and finding piano instructors who are able to teach in that way, because what we do at the Rock School, we're about community, and we're about playing together. And so it always felt weird to have the piano students on the side saying, well, do you have the music for me? And how do we integrate that? So years ago, a friend of mine is a classically trained piano player. I think she had 7 or 8 years of traditional piano lessons growing up. Amazing reader. You could put any piece of music in front of her and she could play it. And I needed a sub at my studio. So I called my friend Tara, and she said, yeah, I'd love to do this. I don't know a lot of pop songs. And I said, don't worry about it. All these students are relative beginners. They're working on whatever. You'll be fine for a night, right? So she teaches for the day, and at the end of the night, we're talking about it. And she was ecstatic. She said, I had so much fun. I wish I could do that. And I said, well, why? You wish you could do what? She said she wishes she could play pop songs. And here I am thinking.
This is the teacher.
This is the 7 or 8 years of classical piano training. And she says, I wish I could play these 4-chord pop songs. And I don't understand. Why do you think so many piano instructors struggle with things like improv and 4-chord pop songs? Is it because of, just like you said, they're they're simply teaching how they were taught?
I think there's a lot of that. I think it is also, we also have in piano, unlike some instruments, a very long history of pedagogy. And it goes back to the 1800s with the likes of Chopin and Liszt and Czerny, people who were incredible teachers and performers. And actually, in my book called No Book Beginners, I talk about this history of print music. When print music started to become popular, it meant that people started reading music that was written, and then that became a thing because there was no audio recordings to listen to. So if you wanted to listen to a Beethoven sonata, then someone's got to play it for you, and they probably should play it the right way. And then pianos became very popular in the early 1900s. And so people started creating method books. And then we just got into this reading paradigm where learning an instrument is all about learning to read notes. And it just stuck. And really, it's only been the last 10 or 15 years that teachers are starting to shift and realize that playing some chords, some pop songs, knowing a bit of improv or being able to do that, or being able to help your student play Happy Birthday without having to stress about it and have music in front of them, is not just, icing on the cake or a bit of junk food along with the important stuff. It is actually fundamental in both retention and engagement of students, but also it really deepens their musical understanding. And I've really tried as much as I can over the last 15 years to help teachers realize that an understanding of chords and an ability to play chords and chord progressions is a fundamental building block of music that we should be explicitly teaching students.
That's interesting. I was speaking with Dave Simon on an episode of the podcast, and we had talked about, because you mentioned just now, what is fundamental to students and learning. And we were talking about, what do students want when they start playing an instrument? And what do their parents want when they start playing an instrument? They want to be sitting at maybe Christmas and the whole family's there, and the kid jumps on the piano or picks up a guitar or whatever and plays a song, and that everyone comes together because of a sense of community. And it is interesting to me that I think that's how we all come to music, right? We all want that, but somewhere along the way, it sort of gets lost in this pressure to understand how to read, or maybe that pressure comes from the parents, maybe the pressure comes from the instructors, but like that desire for what the student wants sometimes gets lost, I think.
Yeah. And I think you've hit on another element that's important, and that's the social aspect of music making. And I would propose a question to your teachers who are listening. Think back to your childhood and teenage years of playing your instrument and ask yourself, what are the biggest, strongest memories from those days? What were you doing that you most remember as a teenage or young child music student? Because for me, and most teachers I speak to and ask this question of, it's when they were playing for their family, when they were performing with a group of mates, when they were in the school band, when they were accompanying somebody, when they were just had a friend over after school and they were just mucking around, when they were at a pizza party that their recital, their teacher had put on as a recital. It's all tends to be social. You remember the things you do with other people. And in some ways, guitar, piano can be kind of isolated. I think piano the most. Pianists, and again, it comes back to this tradition. We're kind of a solo instrument, and if you're really good at piano, then you're a soloist. You're a concert soloist. That's what we're all striving for. But ultimately, the most fun I've had is playing in bands for musical theatre, and working with other musicians and having a jam with my mates and playing in the school rock band and things like that. So I think that's another aspect that's really important, particularly for the piano teachers listening. Think about ways you can get students together. And if you can't, then at least play along to backing tracks. Get them grooving and vibing with other musicians.
Yeah, and for the record, I am not anti-method book either.
No, great.
And we've had that Mandy and I've had that discussion, and so this doesn't feel so imbalanced. One of my big criticisms of so many guitar instructors is that they don't use anything, they don't write anything down.
Yeah, that's right.
That's like
Let's
that
jam.
the complete opposite side. And so again, the spirit of what Mandy and I talk about is how do we kind of bring everyone in the middle a little bit more, so you've got something that's going to work for everyone.
Sorry, John, just on that.
Yeah.
I also thought I should mention too, because teachers often ask, okay, if they're not using a book, what do they do at home? Because as you've said, you send the student home to learn those 3 pieces. Don't turn the page, because I haven't taught you that next thing yet. So for each of the lessons, we give you a practice plan. It's really structured, so you can tell the student exactly what they need to do. And we give you the backing tracks that allow them to keep improvising when you're not there. We have activities where they have to teach their siblings how to sit at the piano and things in their first lesson. So there is a really structured plan to what they need to do at home as well.
The conversation that Tim and I had then turned to talking more about us as instructors and how important it is for us as teachers to find balance for our students and understanding what they need to learn to connect with music and prioritize those things over what we think they should be focused on, and maybe even lightening up on ourselves so that we don't put maybe unnecessary pressure on ourselves to see a certain type of performance or achievement from our students.
The challenge for avant-garde teachers sometimes is trying to do too much. And in the process, making your students kind of confused and not following up on things or sticking with one thing for long enough for them to actually embed it. Okay. And I've done this to my students before, because I'm very excited, as you can probably tell, about like any new idea in pedagogy. I want to try it out. I want to give it a shot. And that's great. But I remember a particular student, his name was James, and I was actually just overwhelming him because each week I was trying something slightly new and experimenting with him. And it just got to the point where he was overwhelmed. We weren't reviewing and embedding things enough. Mm-hmm. And it was, it was quite close that I was almost going to lose this student, actually, because I was almost trying too hard. It was a little bit of that kind of squirrel moment where you're just looking for the shiny next thing without really working on what you've been and reviewing what you've been doing. So I think that is a challenge for avant-garde teachers, because you're really passionate and you're modern and creative and innovative, but you just have to remember to not go overboard.
Question: when you had that experience, because what you were saying reminded me of myself as a new instructor, mm-hmm. where I felt an immense amount of pressure to be teaching something new every single week. And it was self-imposed pressure, by the way. It wasn't, I thought in my mind, okay, well, parents are going to expect that their kids learn something new every week. I got to make sure I'm giving them something new. In your teaching journey, where were you when you had that experience?
Yeah, first few years, I guess. So okay. After I'd started trying to do more and more that wasn't the method book, but I was going too far. And so, and I think it's actually a fairly common process through learning to teach that you do that. And you're right, it's all self-imposed. No one's telling you to do this. And parents, if you ask them, they just want their child to be enjoying it, making some nice sounds, being able to excitedly come to lessons and things like that. They don't necessarily, we hold ourselves up to these expectations all the time, don't we? That we must do this or that. Often the case, it actually take that pressure off yourself and you can enjoy much more what you're doing and be in the moment with a student. And that's often where the magic happens.
That indeed is where the magic happens. Such wise words from Tim Topham and Dave Simon on this episode. To the listeners, thank you for listening through 2025. It's been an amazing year for the podcast, and we're really excited about 2026 and some of the guests that we have coming up on the show. Stay with us and keep doing amazing things in your studios and with your students. If you're a guitar instructor and you've used one of the dozen or so popular method books, you've probably noticed that gap between what's in the books and what students actually want to learn. Most guitar students want to play their favorite songs, and that means strumming, chord changes, timing. If that stuff is even in those method books, it's usually way in the back. I put together the exercises in Complete Guitar Strumming to cover the foundational concepts that all guitar students need, but in a practical way that applies to their goals, which is playing their favorite songs. For instructors, the book comes with an instructor companion guide that walks you through best practices for teaching. I even have training videos that I've used with my own staff that you can access as well. The guide and the videos are free for anyone who wants to use the book for teaching. If you want to get really deep and understand the origins of the book, you can go listen to episode 50 of this podcast, or just head over to rockschoolproprietor.com/book for all the details. If you have topic suggestions or questions, please contact us at info@rockschoolproprietor.com. We'd love to hear from you and hear suggestions for future shows. We've put together some free resources for teachers and studio owners over at rockschoolproprietor.com and a private Facebook group called The Modern Music School. Please join us over there. On social, I'm at rock.school.proprietor on Instagram and John Kazicki on both LinkedIn and Blue Sky. Your ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify are always appreciated. And if you enjoyed the show and gain insight from our conversation, then we count that as a win. All we ask in return is that you pay it forward, and please share the show with someone you think needs to hear it.